And if we see right here where it's got the trajectory of the spacecraft for Space Force, and I zoom in on this little logo and the point where it actually crosses on the logo, and then I put the April 8th eclipse on the screen on this side over here. So this is where the actual eclipse crossing would happen for the 2017 and the 2024 coming up in a couple of days. The actual crossing spot of that, it nearly matches absolutely identically with the Space Command logo. So I've titled this video Eclipse, a Space Force Project, and I actually wanted to look at a few logos that have coincidental matchings with the 2024 eclipse and other oddities. To be fair, there are numerous Space Force and Space Command logos, but this indeed does appear to be one of them. Right here, this image that I have behind me, this is commonly called the Seal of Satan. You'll find this thing all over the place on a lot of different occult websites, this Seal of Satan. Now, here are your science depictions, this one here coming from NASA, on how an eclipse works. I'd like you to just notice how the charting of the lines on this science display for how an eclipse works is nearly absolutely identical to a seal of Satan, a popular seal of Satan, one of the most popular seals of Satan found on Luciferian or occult websites. And actually the eclipses themselves, and I've got 3 of them on the back screen right here. Here are the major ones. This is the 2017 eclipse coming this way, and here is the 2024 eclipse coming up on April 8th. It looks very similar to the seal of Satan as well. Now on the flip side of all of that, it quite simply looks like, it makes a configuration that's very much like the Hebrew symbols, the ancient Hebrew symbols of the Aleph and the Tav. So right here in the Aleph, of course, would be the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So like God said, I am the beginning and the end, the Aleph and the Tav. So the Aleph would be this symbol here that's going like this, looking a little bit like an A, only it would be configured sideways if it were an Aleph. And these 2 paths here, they make the symbol of what would be an ancient Tav. The ancient Tav is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It's actually a symbol of a cross. It means sign or mark. And in fact, in Genesis 1:14, God said that He made the heavenly bodies above. This would most certainly include the sun and the moon for signs and for seasons. And that's what we're coming up on. Now, this sign happens on April 8th. 8 is a number of, 8 would be the ancient symbol of the Het. It's also where we get the infinity symbol from. It's a symbol of new beginnings. So just like there were 8 people on Noah's Ark, the symbol of the Het, it means new beginnings. It would be Nisan the first on the Hebrew calendar, the ancient Hebrew calendar. Again, the start of a new beginning is what it would be. And I'd like to point out, so in this image here, making a cross over the United States, perhaps for those against America, it might, for them, in occult belief sets or Luciferian occult belief sets, they might believe it's time for America to end now, and that this X right here marks a time for America to go bye-bye. From a Christian belief set, it might mark a time that the Lord is putting His cross, the Aleph and the Tav, the beginning and the end, the sign of His cross over this United States. Many state that America is like Babylon. Stated that myself in a lot of videos. Let me clarify some things here. This land was founded by godly people. And the prayers that they had for this nation, the Lord put an incredible blessing on this land called the United States. I do not believe that He has changed His mind, nor has He forgotten the prayers of all of those people that laid their lives on the highest altars of sacrifice for this United States. Now, side by side with that, just like the parable of the wheat and the tares, that they both grow up together, you've had a lot of occult that has also grown up side by side in this land that the Lord had an enormous blessing on. But we're coming up on an eclipse, a very unusual set, the conclusion of a very unusual set of eclipses that makes this tov across the United States. And I'd like to talk a little about what I think that might mean. And just to throw out there for you, I think you have some heavy judgments coming, but that these are to shake you, actually in quite a literal sense. I believe so in some of the prophecies that a man named Kim Clement gave in the time period coming up where there would be some heavy changes in the United States, and you would see prosper, and you would see a shaking out of darkness. There would actually be volcanoes, one in specific that would be very heavy. And I would like to note the paths of these eclipses. I do not believe, I don't know if there will be anything that happens specifically on that date, but I think you're coming into a time frame where you are going to have a volcano and earthquakes according to prophecies, and according to, well, let's look at some of the other signs that are affiliated with this configuration that we have on the screen behind me. Now, if I draw us back for just a moment, back to our occult symbolism here that looks very similar to our sciencey symbolism right here, I think you've got a lot of occult stuff going on that makes its way in, and that extends to include whether people intend it or not. But speaking of sciencey and eclipses, here is the WEF, or better known as the World Economic Forum logo. I'd like you to notice that it actually makes an eclipse right here. And in the midst of that eclipse, Bonnie have pointed out that you have three of the O's, 1, 2, 3. This sort of makes sixes in this configuration. Now they meet up in Davos, Switzerland is where they meet at. Very similar in location to where you have another quasi or claimed sciencey organization that goes by the name CERN. It's got a logo very much not only looks like a set of eclipses coming together, but also looks like a set of exactly 3 sixes, just like NASA is planning to fire 3 rockets straight up at the eclipse. Now CERN has been contacted by many. The fact check sheets are they're miles long, talking about how CERN has stated it's not doing anything during the eclipse, and more than this, to even suggest they're opening portals to the pit of hell. It's funny that they even have to respond to these things. A claimed science organization is putting forth responses stating that they are not opening a portal to the pit of hell, but in fact they deny fully that they're opening a portal to the pit of hell. So I would note that in this video. That's their claim. Now, out front CERN, you don't have a lot of sciencey symbols like one might expect, maybe a DNA strand or a model of the universe, but instead we have here, standing inside of this eclipse-looking circle, we have the goddess Shiva, or the god Shiva, who is the destroyer, who you could liken to Apollyon in the book of Revelation. In fact, many do. I'd like to show you just a few images of the gravity of what I'm talking about here. When they did a reopening for work at the CERN and their tunneling projects there in Switzerland, they put on a ceremony that was, well, we have people behind that are they're half naked and they're in a zombie. It's men and women in basically their underpants, and they appear to be in a zombie-like state. Then following this, we're going to have come forth the legends of Krampus, the Norse folklore. He comes forth for the children at night, the children that Santa finds naughty. And of course, Santa is really a prefiguring. Santa is you mix the letters around and you've got Satan, but it's a throwback to Nimrod. This is all, when you look at Krampus, he's coming to take the children away. This is a very sadistic type of imagery, and in truth, This goes all the way back, this little Sumerian Akkadian idol that I have in my hand. On the Epic of Gilgamesh, you've of course got Gilgamesh, and his friend is Enkidu, who's pictured right here, who's part man, part beast, just like Krampus is. And Enkidu literally means, so Enkidu means Enki created, the god Enki created. The fact that this is the sort of thing that the positions of power behind the scenes are funding in every instance, and this isn't just a little bit of funding. This is like, when you talk about currency, you're talking about a current of sheer money that's just flowing, funding any one of these projects. What are they really doing? And the source behind things, even going back hundreds of years, goes back to dark castles, royalty, which means they're above the rules, funding these secret societies that are kind of the front organizations for them. And then in front of that, the narrative or advertising you get, the marketing in front of the monster for whatever the monster needs next. And I would argue that the ancient monster hasn't changed, going all the way back even to the days of Nimrod himself. Here's Krampus holding a little girl by the hair. He's chained. He's got his tongue out, which of course is a throwback. Gilgamesh and Enkidu. Enkidu has always got his private part erect. He's coming forth to grab the temple prostitutes. Here's Krampus here. If we come over to our Baphomet, now the Baphomet is both male and female. There's a lot of transgender things that are being pitched. He's got these serpents coming up from between the legs. Krampus, the Baphomet, going all the way back to Enkidu and the Tower of Babel. I would argue they're all one and the same thing. And here, of course, on the back screen, I've got imagery of Azazel. This actually comes out of the dictionary Infernal. And what it states here, this comes from 1863, this drawing that I've got here of Azazel, the goat demon. The whole earth has been corrupted. This comes from the book of Enoch. The whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. What are we worshiping and trying to open doors for?
The Large Hadron Collider will reopen today after 3 years of being shut down for improvements.
CERN has made headlines yet again. The renowned laboratory for particle physics has announced a rather unprecedented discovery.
Scientists at the CERN Nuclear Research Centre in Switzerland have succeeded today in producing record-breaking high-energy particle collisions
made by their Large Hadron Collider that may likely cause a shift in our understanding of the universe. Scientists have reported that these anomalous readings could signal the existence of extraterrestrial life in a parallel universe.
Or, option B, is the entire thing just a giant overglorified Ouija board with a logo comprised of 3 distinct sixes, and talking to spirits from the other side and opening gateways is what we've been trying to do actually the entire time. Yet they don't put science symbols like a DNA strand or particles out front of it. No, instead they have Shiva out front. Here's seen behind me the actual symbolism that they have at the entrance to CERN. Now Shiva in Hinduism is it's a supreme being, is the destroyer god, is what Shiva is, which many liken to passages out of Revelation 9, where a star that has fallen from heaven is given the keys to the bottomless pit. And when the bottomless pit is opened and smoke comes forth like a furnace from this bottomless pit, these demon locusts come out. Now in passage 9:11, Revelation 9:11, these locusts have a king above them, who is Apollyon, or the destroyer, just as Shiva is the destroyer. So these are specifically because normal locusts do not have a king over them. These things that come forth that are described as demonic entities coming forth from a demonic bottomless pit are described as having an ancient king, an ancient fallen star, fallen angel king over them. I'd like to take a look at a few bullets that I've made about this particular eclipse that we have coming on April 8th of 2024. That's a number of high authority, is the number 24. So many elders are around the throne of God in the book of Revelation. It's a number of high authority, a number of breaking the bondage of chains, breaking free from something. And 8 is a number of new beginning, and this would of course happen on Nisan the 1st, which on an ancient Hebrew calendar would put you be the first, it'd be the beginning of a new year, just like an eclipse is a circle. On our pre-flood book, it has an eclipse on the cover when we talk about pre-flood and a lot of these things. In Genesis 1:14, you're talking about the heavenly bodies are for signs and for seasons. That's what they're put there for, and that's what this is. It's a sign that is coming. So number 1 on these bullet points, it's going through 7 towns or close to 7 towns with the name Nineveh. I'd like to highlight that for a second in the United States. Now only 2 of these 7 Ninevehs are in the path of totality of the eclipse. I find this is important as well, as 5 is actually a number of grays. So it goes through directly over in totality 2 of them, but 5 the number of grays. They're kind of on the side of it. That's the number 2 I've got on there. Now number 3 that I've got on this page, it goes through a town called Rapture. Rapture is the only town named that in the United States, and it is in the totality's path. Now rapture, and this is a very debatable topic within Christianity, but the concept of rapture, I'd like to point out to you that the idea of rapture is that you have a time of tribulation that you're salvaged or you're saved from. There are 3 heavy things that, just like the 3 rockets that NASA is firing, the 666 on many that appears to be on many of these logos. Well, even the 666, or these triplicates, these 3s, just like God is triune, that you have 3 parts. You have 3 things that are heavy that I think that are coming. 1, I think, are weather issues. Number 2, you're in the stages of war, and these 2 things could be connected. So some of these weather issues, or volcanoes, or specifically earthquakes, there are prophecies that state that in this time that you're coming in, you're going to have major earthquakes in the United States.
The strongest earthquake in 140 years, John.
Look at all that, and it's not over yet because we've got the Eclipse earthquake coming up on Monday. As Deborah Ross was telling us, it's going to be a transformative experience for anybody who is in the area of totality.
There's some interesting gaffes that are being shared quite a lot, and in fact there was a news reporter on Fox News that actually had the earthquake from yesterday, the 6th, and he overlaid it with the path of the eclipse. Here behind me is an image we're going to look at more in just a second, of where you have this New Madrid fault line where the X crosses, or the X marks the spot. I'm more concerned about the days following, or the time frame that is following this enormous set of signs, this eclipse in the sky, that you are in fact going to have earthquakes, substantial weather and earth-shaking, ground-shaking events. This is just prophetically what's spoken of in the time frame that's coming on the road ahead. Now, speaking of Ninevehs, we also have a Jonah in here. Jonah, Texas, the only town named Jonah in the United States, and it's in totality's path. Number 4, Jonah. Now, the story of Jonah, you've got too many Ninevehs and Jonah in the heart of it to ignore the messaging to that. So in the story of Jonah, Jonah did not want to go to the people of Nineveh and ask them to repent. He tried. That's how he ended up in the belly of the great fish. Is that he was actually he felt like those people deserved the judgment that was coming. He felt like they actually deserved the judgment that is coming. And I've actually felt that way in my spirit quite a lot about America. That I felt like, and that's what a lot of other nations that are against you. I think that very often here in the United States, we forget how many nations are against us. I read commonly in articles that weapons that could cause either earthquakes or volcanoes or other things, or forest fires, wildfires, are conspiracies. I read this all the time from the mainstream, the legacy medias. It's been my personal experience just in friendships and relationships, some of the military contractors that I have, that's common knowledge in those fields. And not only is that common knowledge that the United States has weapons that can do these things or worse than you can imagine, but more than that, that we have foreign adversaries. Specifically in my mind, I'm thinking about China, because there will be a nation that is going to come very suddenly on this United States, according to prophecies given by Kim Clement. And some of these weather things that are coming, I'm not sure if they're natural, I'm not sure if the Lord is sending them, or if some of them are actually that you are at war right now on a lot of fronts of the globe. And it would be foolish to believe that you are not in a quasi kind of confusing war here in the United States. Just yesterday we had an earthquake that was a 4.8. The date of the eclipse is 4.8. 4.8. You had a 4.8 earthquake yesterday, which hit in New Jersey, and it also had its center point was on one of Trump's golf courses, which I find interesting. The town of Jonah did not want to go to the people of Nineveh and tell them to repent, but he finally did go, and the people of Nineveh changed their hearts, and they repented, and the Lord spared them. Now, speaking of an image of a cross that would be on the United States, because that's one of the images. So on the day of the cross, there was an earthquake that shook the ground, and it ripped the cloth where the Ark of the Covenant was kept. Is what it did, from top to bottom. As in 2017, that's another interesting number right there. 1 and a 7. That also makes 8, but 17 in 2017. So you've had a window of time between these 2 points. That was the year that Donald Trump went into office. And you've had unusual fights in your nation. And you've had all sorts of things that are very, very strange, including the COVID pandemic that came, that have come since that time, almost like both a physical and a spiritual war against you. During that COVID lockdown, you were asked to stand specifically 6 feet apart. I have entire videos I would really recommend on the issue of earthquakes and the issue of the pandemic and these other things, that you go look at some of our videos like Deep State. There are a lot of very odd things, very odd symbolic things and prophetic things that happen through the haze of these events. In the course of all of this, I do not believe you're at the end times. I believe that your best days for this nation are ahead. And I believe that this sign is quite simply a part of that. But also you've had prophecies on your nation. And your nation is not as Babylonian as people surmise or think. There's an echelon of that's going on, like a cream that's floating on the top. But the hearts of this nation, the base and foundation and core of this United States, is a set of people that really wants to know and love the Lord. And they want peace and they want prosperity for themselves and their families. And I believe that the Lord has heard their cry and that there's going to be a shaking on this land. That's what I believe. There will be 7 cities. That right there is an interesting number, named Salem in totality's path, as in, or the same as in 2017. So this is being emphasized to you twice. Now, Salem, of course, is where you get the word Jerusalem. A lot of the focus that is coming in the future also will be on Israel. And we're commanded that there's a lot of people that are speaking in the Christian community against Israel. And they'll talk about fake Jews, and they'll talk about fake this, fake that, they're doing this, they're doing that. Okay, well, when you are praying for Israel, you're not praying for a fake set of people or a Luciferian set of people. You're praying for God's people. And God's people are Israel, and also it's the body of believers. It's a body of believers, but we're called to pray for Israel. And I would ask you to do that. I would ask you to consider my words heavily and do that. Number six, that would be the Vav in Hebrew. The eclipse is set to take place on April 8th, 2024. That's the number of new beginnings, the 8, on the Western Gregorian calendar. On the Hebrew calendar, the eclipse will usher in the biblical New Year on Nisan the 1st. Now, I'd like to come over here and I'd like to take a look at this graphic here, and I know it's a little fuzzy. I didn't actually make this graphic, so thank you to whoever did. I found it online, but it's got the path. What they're pointing out here are these fault lines, specifically this New Madrid fault line right here. Now, the New Madrid earthquake happened this was a series of earthquakes, apparently, that happened in 1811 through 1812, and these were mammoth earthquakes. These were 7.2 and 8.2. I'm very doubtful that this is by coincidence, and this is where that New Madrid fault line is right there, where these two lines cross, these two of the major eclipses cross. It has rested on my spirit for a lot of years. I've not known really how to couch it well, that you all have issues with weather that are coming. And I believe a lot of that, I mean, in both a physical sense and a spiritual sense, it's sort of man-made, whether it's the Lord allowing it to happen or whether it's people that have done things to the environment that, not to the environment, they're deliberately using weapons of war against you that are causing earthquakes. In those prophecies, it says the nations of the earth are standing waiting for the earth to shake. That means they're waiting for it. That means they know that it's coming. And this is a way of fighting you where it's very confusing what's happening. And I think you're entering a range of time that will be some of the heaviest and most unusual years in American history. I believe that in the end of them that you are going to take enormous victories. But I think through the course of them, a lot of people are going to become very, very afraid in a lot of stuff that's coming. And they're going to look for hope in people that have hope and people that have the Lord. And there could also be a lot of very, very sad moments on the days ahead. But I'd like you to have hope in the fact that I do not believe that you're at the end. I believe that you actually are at the beginning of some new things for this nation, where you are going to have your best years in this nation ahead. Now, the last of all of these that I'd like to point out is a town or an area called Little Egypt, which is about right here where the cross is made on this tav, this sign, this mark. So in the dead center of it, you have this area that this commonly goes by the name Little Egypt. Egypt is a symbol, biblically speaking, of bondage, breaking the chains of bondage. Many have described this time period that you're in, where this symbol, what I believe this symbol actually marks, is a time period where you're going to be walking out of bondage. Now, when the Hebrews walked out of the 10 plagues that happened in Egypt, you've been going through some time frames of some plagues. And those plagues included actual plagues, but they also included the ground shaking, literally the earth itself giving notice to Pharaoh, a situation of light versus dark, which is what I think you are specifically in this time frame, a struggle between light and dark. And Little Egypt being at the heart of this cross right here, well, Egypt is a symbol, the Exodus story is a symbol of deliverance from bondage. Here on the screen behind me, this is actual CGI imagery of the waters parting that will be in our new Exodus that we are putting forth at God in a Nutshell, and hope to have it up in this year of 2024. We did the first part of the Exodus, which was, of course, the rise of Joseph. I believe it's an incredible film. And this second one, when you see our waters parting, I think this came out very incredibly. We have a variety of films over at God in a Nutshell. I want to thank all of you that are partners at God in a Nutshell. I think we have a lot of films over there that you will really enjoy watching. But I also strongly believe it's the Lord doing these things, making these signs. And that there are three distinct things. I got them incorrect earlier in this presentation. They are, the first one of them is weather events, a ground shaking earthquakes that are coming. The second of these are that you have war on the horizon. Sort of a strange kind of war is what I think you're walking through the mix of. And that could be tied in with some of the weather events. Maybe not all, but some of the weather events is what I'm putting forward to you. And the third one is you're even getting warnings about this eclipse coming, about terrorism being at those events. Or at those gatherings where people are going to look at the eclipse. I'm less concerned about the day of the eclipse, although things may happen that day, than I am worried about the actual time frame for a while that will be coming after this eclipse. I think it is marking a time where the Lord is, I can't emphasize it enough, is going to shake specifically the United States, but the entirety of the world is what I believe is coming, and a lot of focus on the horizon will be put to all those cities of Salem that this eclipse is passing through both the first time and the second time, that's like a double portion, you're going to have a lot of focus on Israel on the coming horizon. That's what I believe that this sign marks. But then in the end of it, that you will have deliverance, and it will be absolutely clear that it is the Lord that's doing it. I'm Trey Smith of God in a Nutshell. I'd like to thank the men and women of Space Force. I found their logo, or one of their logos, interesting enough to present in this film. I'd like to also give a special thanks to all of the men and women of law enforcement of every possible type in this United States, and of all of our armed forces. Once again, I am Trey Smith of God in a Nutshell. I think we have wealths of other films that are equally as good, if not better, than the presentation that you just watched. I hope you enjoy The Eclipse on April 8th. And God bless, that's a number of new beginnings. That's what I believe you're walking into. God bless every last one of you and your families on the other side of the screen.